The toaster popped, and the bread was still white. 5 minutes since I'd pressed the lever, and the machine had simply given up. Same as everyone in this house eventually did with anything that didn't serve a purpose. I set the cold toast down and looked instead at my cousins, arguing over the seating arrangement of the mahogany dining table. My Aunt Eleanor was placing a lace doily under a crystal vase with the precision of a surgeon, though her hands weren't quite steady. She caught me watching, took in my oversized t-shirt and the bun I hadn't bothered to fix, and gave me the smile she reserved for waitstaff and me. "You're staring, Maya." Her voice was a polished pebble of a sound. "Do try to focus on the occasion. Your father's lawyer arrives in 20 minutes, and we really must present a unified front." Unified was generous. Marcus and Chloe were locked in a silent war over elbow room, sliding the silverware toward the center of the table inch by inch, as if territory here meant anything yet. They weren't mourning my father. They were furnishing his death with adjectives. Unexpected, tragic, so much left undone, while their real conversation ran underneath in the present tense. Summer homes in Tuscany, new portfolios, numbers that hadn't been assigned to them yet, but already felt spent. I took the seat at the far end, the only one that didn't require competing for space, and thought about the last thing my father had said to me on the phone 3 months before he died. Not stocks, not real estate. He'd used the word steganographic, hiding the true message inside something that looked, to anyone not looking for it, entirely ordinary. I'd assumed he was just tired and reaching for a big word to dress up the tiredness. I hadn't asked what he meant. I wished now that I had. "Did you actually read the preliminary notice?" Marcus asked, having won the silverware war by shoving the breadbasket into Chloe's lap. He turned to me with an expression built from equal parts pity and rehearsal. "About the trust. It's basically a formality. The liquid assets go to primary lineage. You're the wild card, Maya. But don't worry. We'll make sure a modest stipend covers your artistic pursuits." A modest stipend. The words tasted like the toast. I didn't argue. Arguing with Marcus was like trying to explain color to a stone that had already decided it was a diamond. The doorbell cut through the room like something snapping. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. Marcus was up before the second ring. Mr. Sterling didn't so much enter as arrive, a leather case older than the house under one arm, and he took his seat without offering condolences, because condolences were for people who still needed them. "The will is straightforward," he said, laying a sheet of vellum on the table. "Primary lineage receives the residential properties and the stock portfolio, provided both are managed under the covenants your father specified." Marcus leaned in until his chest nearly touched the wood. "However, the liquid assets, the cash reserves, the high-yield trust, were routed through a separate instrument, a shadow account, for lack of a better term." Shadow account? Eleanor's composure slipped a fraction. That was never in the preliminary notice. Sterling didn't answer directly. He set a small velvet pouch and a handwritten envelope on the table, and the soft weight of them landing seemed to fill the whole room. Marcus stared at the pouch like it might detonate. Arguing with Marcus was like trying to explain color to a stone that had already decided it was a diamond. The doorbell cut through the room like something snapping. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. Marcus was up before the second ring. Mr. Sterling didn't so much enter as arrive, a leather case older than the house under one arm, and he took his seat without offering condolences, because condolences were for people who still needed them. "The will is straightforward," he said, laying a sheet of vellum on the table. "Primary lineage receives the residential properties and the stock portfolio, provided both are managed under the covenants your father specified." Marcus leaned in until his chest nearly touched the wood. "However, the liquid assets, the cash reserves, the high-yield trust, were routed through a separate instrument, a shadow account, for lack of a better term." Shadow account? Eleanor's composure slipped a fraction. That was never in the preliminary notice. Sterling didn't answer directly. He set a small velvet pouch and a handwritten envelope on the table, and the soft weight of them landing seemed to fill the whole room. Marcus stared at the pouch like it might detonate. The temperature of the room changed. The greed that had been humming quietly all morning spiked into something more frantic. Chloe, who'd spent the last hour treating me like a smudge on a window, turned suddenly warm. Maya, darling, you know how much we've always admired your independence. We should sit down together, manage this as a family. I didn't answer her. I opened the envelope instead. Inside was a single card, coordinates, and a line in my father's sprawling hand. For the one who remembers, the art is in the hiding, not the owning. I didn't need a map. The coordinates were for the potting shed at the edge of the property, the one place he'd forbidden the gardeners from touching for 20 years, the one place no one had ever wanted to look because it had never looked like it held anything. That was the point. That had always been the point. Marcus was on his feet. The shed's a derelict heap of rot, rusted shears and bags of peat moss. That's it. He held out his hand. Give me the key, Maya. You're not even a homeowner here. Let primary lineage handle retrieval. We'll see your cut is handled fairly.
I stepped back instead. For the first time in my life, the room's weather had shifted around me rather than past me, and the sensation was almost dizzying. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at a vault, and I was the only one who knew the combination. "I'll handle it myself," I said. The walk to the shed took 4 minutes. It felt longer, with Marcus and Chloe close behind, saying nothing, their silence loud with arithmetic. Houses they now understood they couldn't afford to heat. A gala Chloe had already half planned with money that had just revealed itself to be someone else's leash. The shed smelled of damp earth and old rust. Inside, bolted to a workbench between the yellowed newspapers and garden tools, sat an iron lockbox with no keyhole, just a slot shaped exactly like the key in my hand. "Let me do it," Marcus said. "You're shaking. You'll jam it." I didn't let him. The key turned with a click that felt less like a mechanism and more like a verdict, and the lid opened on an encrypted drive and a second letter, dated 2 weeks before my father died. "To my dearest Maya," it read. "If you're reading this, the others have already started measuring square footage in their heads. Let them. The trick was never to hide the money. Anyone can hide money. The trick was to hide it inside the very thing they were sure they already owned." I slotted the drive into the portable reader I'd carried in my bag for years without ever knowing why he'd insisted on it. The screen woke with a cold blue light, a single prompt, a thumbprint, and a spoken word. I pressed my thumb to the glass and said the word he always used before a joke nobody else found funny: sfumato. The ledgers unfolded, not a separate pile of money sitting apart from the estate, a set of liens quietly filed against the very properties Marcus and Chloe had just been handed, each one naming the Shadow Trust as note holder. My father hadn't hidden his fortune from his children. He'd hidden it inside their inheritance, disguised as the ordinary cost of owning it, the maintenance fund, the insurance escrow, the fine print nobody reads because it looks like paperwork rather than power. Steganographic, exactly as he'd said. The message was never separate from the message's disguise. "What does that mean?" Marcus's voice cracked as he tried to see over my shoulder. I stepped back, hip against the bench. "Say it in English. Who owns the houses?" "You do," I said. "The titles are yours, but the liens are mine. And if the loans they secure ever go unpaid, by your choice or mine, the properties come back to the trust that's holding them. You didn't inherit real estate, Marcus. You inherited a very expensive rental with my name quietly listed as landlord." "That's not possible,"
Chloe said, though the venom had drained out of her, replaced by something closer to panic. The will said primary lineage gets the properties. It did. You got the paper. He kept the plumbing. Marcus lunged, not at me, at the reader, and slipped on the wet peat moss, going down hard in a cloud of dust and old cobwebs, his suit ruined in a way no dry cleaner would fix. He lay there staring up at the rafters, the heir to a dynasty undone by a bag of soil, and I felt no triumph in it, just a long, cool clarity, like a window finally opened in a room that had been sealed for years. "We can work something out," he said, scrambling up, brushing at the gray smear on his trousers. "A partnership. You bring the liquidity, we bring the management experience. You wouldn't know the first thing about running a portfolio this size." "Funny," I said. "You're still doing the thing he wrote about, measuring everything in yield."
I walked back toward the house without waiting to see if they'd follow. I heard them anyway, Chloe's heels, Marcus's heavier, defeated tread, not out of love, but because I was, for the moment, the only source of oxygen left in a room they hadn't realized had gone airless. Eleanor was waiting on the terrace. She hadn't come to the shed. She'd stayed behind with the doilies and the vase, keeping the house presentable for a version of the afternoon that no longer existed. When she saw my face and then Marcus's, she didn't ask what had happened. She already knew. She'd known my father longest, after all, knew the particular shape of his patience, the way he built things to look like nothing until the moment they had to be everything. "He told you to hide it in the shed," she said quietly, not a question. "He told me to hide it in plain sight. The shed was just where plain sight happened to be standing." She was quiet a moment, and something in her face, the tightness she wore like a second set of pearls, loosened just slightly. "He'd tried to tell me something like that once, about you. I didn't listen. I thought he meant you needed protecting." She looked toward the shed, then back at me. "He meant the opposite, didn't he? He meant I was the one who wouldn't sell the light on the salt marsh to buy a penthouse," I said. "That was never a stipend, Eleanor. It was a test, and everyone at that table failed it before lunch."
I didn't wait for her answer. I found Marcus and Chloe still catching their breath by the rosebed, and I gave them the only offer I had. You keep the titles. You keep the prestige, the addresses, the story you tell at dinner parties. You'll also pay a management fee to the trust on the first of every month without fail. Try to sell so much as a fence post without my signature, and I'll call the loan. You'll learn exactly how fast primary lineage can be evicted by its own paperwork. "How much?" Marcus asked, and for the first time all day, his voice didn't have an angle in it. "Enough for a studio in the city," I said. "Enough that nobody in this family ever gets to call what I do a hobby again. I'll send the invoice Monday." I walked back to the house with the drive in my pocket, and it didn't feel like a scepter the way I might once have imagined it would. It felt like the last honest thing my father had ever handed me. Not a fortune, but a place to stand where no one could tell me it was smaller than it looked.